Hello everyone. You are welcome to today's session on Empower 360 podcast, where we give purpose and enlightenment to humanity. Here at Empower 360 podcast, we strive to bring you ideas and perspectives from various fields and industries. My name is Liliefa, and I'll be co-hosting today's session with Enoch Chanimbe. You can join us every 2 weeks to elevate your life and get insight on thought-provoking topics. Our topic for today is a very interesting one, which has actually spanned a lot of debates across our continent, Africa. And the topic is religion really Africans' problem? Our guest for today is a Christian apologist who serves with the Legon Interdenominational Church, which is also known as LIC. He actually holds a BSc degree in public administration and an MPhil in human resource management. Audience, our guest for today is Aziz Christian Jabaru. Aziz, your audience, your special guest. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much. Am I audible, Lily? Am I audible?
Yes, you're audible. You can go ahead. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much for this opportunity. And thank you for this subject you want me to discuss. It's a very interesting one. And like you mentioned, it's one that has sparked a lot of debate across. People everywhere are discussing this subject. Is religion actually the problem we are facing in Africa? Whenever there's an issue, people are quick to point their fingers at religion, religious figures, religious bodies, and all of that. So it's a very important discussion, and I hope that at the end of today's session, we would have a nuanced or a refined understanding or a refined view of whether indeed religion is really Africa's problem. So I'll just begin. Is religion really Africa's problem? That's the subject. I remember a few months ago, I was going to buy something. And then when I was buying it, there were people gathered there, and there was actually a church close to where I was buying. I was buying a set of fruits, some fruits. So there were people gathered where I was buying it. And then there was a church close. They were having praises and all of that. And suddenly an argument broke out, and one guy was insulting the people in the church that, all these people are the reasons why we are struggling in Africa. They're always making noise. They're always doing this. They're always doing that. And it just brought up a lot of arguments and discussions over there at that point. And I'm sure a number of us have had similar experiences where people suddenly point hands at religion. People suddenly try to say that religion is Africa's problem and all of that. But today, like I mentioned, I hope that we would have a more refined understanding of whether indeed religion is Africa's problem. So as part of our discussions today, we are first going to tackle what religion really means. The definition of religion, as you can see from the table of contents. Then we would look at the general statistics of religion in Africa. Then we would look at the history of religion in Africa, which is a very important part of our discussion today. Then we'll look at the contributions of religion in Africa. Then we'll tackle some of the misconceptions about religion in Africa. And then we'll pose the big question of whether religion is a tool that is being used for good or evil. And we'll finally address the real issue that we are facing in Africa. So kindly follow along with me. Okay, can you please scroll down a bit on the first slide? What is religion? Good. So religion, like most of us know, is a system of beliefs and practices and rituals and moral codes that people follow. So it is primarily centered around the worship of a deity or a higher power. So most people or most religious folks have certain practices that they follow. They have certain codes that they obey they have certain rules that they obey because they see it as a way they are able to worship their God. And it mostly involves a group of followers who have similar ideologies. So religion basically is a system of belief or rituals that people do or practice occasionally. So lots of religious belief systems in our world. So the Christians go to church mostly on Sundays, some on Saturdays. The Muslims also have their own religious practices that they do. They pray 5 times a day. They go to Mecca. They practice zakat, that is the giving of alms, and all of that. The African traditional religion also have certain religious practices that they follow, like the pouring of libation and all of that. So religion is quite common in our parts of the world, as we find ourselves. It's quite common, and most of us, if not all of us here, are some way somehow attached to a particular kind of religious system. Lily, can you move to the next slide? I can't see the slide again.
Yes, unfortunately, I'm not the one sharing the slides. It's the co-host. So, I don't know, probably if you can just go according to your slide till he comes back to share it.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
All right. So, yes, so the next slide was to look at the general statistics of religion that we have here in Africa. And when you analyze religion critically, you get to know that there are a lot of religious belief systems. And the dominant one is Christianity, which, according to most studies, it's about 33% of Africa's population. So about 33% of Africans ascribe to the Christian religious system. And then about 21% see themselves to be Muslims. And we have a portion also, about 14%, subscribing to their own diverse African traditional faith systems. Then we have the Buddhist and other minor religious systems. But then the major religious systems that we have here in Africa is the Christian religion, the Islamic religion, and the African traditional religion. Those are the 3 main religions we have in Africa, and those 3 religions would be the center of my discussion. So pardon me if you are not a part of any of these faith systems, but then these are the dominant religions that we have in Africa. So I would use them as the sample for my discussion here. Okay. I'll try. All right. So we just finished the general discussion, the general statistics, of religion in Africa. And you can see, can you please go up a bit? You can see the demographics over there. So the purple and blue parts represents Christianity. It represents the parts that are predominantly Christian. And the green section represents the parts that are predominantly Muslims. And you find a certain other colors within, which also stand for the other minor religious belief systems we have in Africa. But then let's quickly move to the history of religion in Africa. History of religion in Africa. And I'll first begin with the Christian religion. So many times when we talk about Christianity in Africa, most people are quick to point to the kind of Christianity that was experienced during the colonial era. Most people believe that Christianity in Africa began when the whites came to Africa to engage in the slave trade. But that is not really the case according to history. Christianity has a long and diverse history in Africa, and it dates back to the early centuries, or that's the first century. Christianity was already here in Africa, and it has significantly influenced the cultural, social, and political landscape of various regions on the continent. So look at a few areas or some of the areas where Christianity went to when it began. So in the first century, that is, early Christianity began in North Africa. When you do a critical study of history, you get to know that Christianity in Africa started from North Africa. So according to Christian history, Christianity was introduced to Egypt by the Apostle Mark around 42 AD. And that is 42 years after the death of Christ. So it wasn't so long after Jesus died, then we had Christianity come into Egypt. So that is according to the Christian history, or according to history generally. And also when you go to Egypt, most of the Orthodox churches that you find in Egypt, we call them the Coptic Orthodox churches. They were established way in the early century. That's the first century. And these Coptic churches have developed over the years. When you go there, you find a lot of art and theology and certain symbols that depict that, that show how Christianity emerged in ancient in Egypt back then. So before the coming of the colonial era, there was Christianity in Egypt, which began in the first century. And then also when you come to the Maghreb region, when we talk of the Maghreb region, we are talking of the western part of Egypt. That's the modern day Libya, Tunisia, Algeria, and Morocco. All these regions also became home to influential Christian thinkers. They became centers of Christianity globally, not just even in Africa. So you find very popular Christian thinkers or leaders like St. Augustine, like St. Anthony, like Athanasius. These are names that were popular or names that have emerged in Christian history. People like Tertullian. These are people who, when you read Christian history, they are very, very influential figures who promoted Christianity. And all these people were Africans. They were Africans. They were people who were mostly just like us. They were not Europeans. So when you study Christianity critically, you realize that Africa was a very, very, very influential continent when it came to the spread of Christianity globally. And then also, when you go to this Maghreb region that I'm talking about, you get to know that some of even the Christian doctrines that people believe even today, like the Trinity, like even the canonization of the Bible and all of that, you get to know that most of these events took place in Africa. They took place in Africa, in areas like Tunisia, Morocco, Algeria, and all that. And all these information are found in history. I mean, they are confirmed in history. Also, areas like Sudan, in the past, it used to be called Nubia. So anytime you read the Bible and you find any country or any name like Nubia, that is a reference to Sudan. So Christianity was introduced to the Nubian kingdoms as far back as the 6th century. And up to date, there are cathedrals in Sudan. That's when you go, you find old cathedrals that are still existing that show that Christianity existed even before the colonial era. And then another popular country where Christianity was very common there, way before the colonial era, was Ethiopia. And in ancient times was called Kush, so Cush, so Kush. So Ethiopia was also a major part of the development of Christianity globally. And so when you go to Ethiopia currently, there are a lot of monuments and buildings and churches and belief systems and practices that trace their roots back to the development of Christianity or to the growth of Christianity in the first century. So Christianity, to a large extent, was already existent in Africa. And the colonial era also came, and that was when most countries in West Africa got to experience Christianity. And so it's not surprising that when people talk about Christianity, their minds immediately go to the colonial era, because for most of us in West Africa, Christianity was introduced to us during the colonial era. But for those in the northern part of Africa, the eastern part of Africa, they had a taste of Christianity way before the colonial era. And then also when you go to Islam, Islam also began to spread in Africa shortly after the 7th century, mainly through trade and migration and conquest. So through wars and all that. So it spread rapidly through North Africa in the 7th and the 8th century. And Egypt was one of the major centers where Islam spread. And also in West Africa, Islam spread through the trans-Saharan trade route. So most Muslim traders, through trading, were able to spread Islam. So people like Mansa Musa, that I'm sure most of us may have heard of, was one of the people who was spreading Islam in West Africa back in the 13th to the 15th century. And then in the eastern part of Africa too, we find Swahili states like the Mombasa and all these places being centers of Islamic trade and all that. So Islam also existed before the colonial era. Okay, and then we have our African traditional religion, which were religious belief systems that were there even way before the arrival of Christianity and Islam. So African societies practiced their own form of religion in a variety of ways, and there were groups that were serving different gods. When you go to the Yoruba, you find people who served gods of iron, gods of war, gods of love. Even in Ghana here, you find the Akans, the Nodness, and all of that. They all had their own systems of worship. So the point is that religion had always been existing in Africa. That is the three major religions that I'm talking about: Islam, Christianity, and the African traditional religion. They all existed in Africa way before the colonial era. Way before the colonial era. So it is not the colonial era that introduced Christianity or Islam or the African traditional religion to us. They helped in the spread of it, but they didn't necessarily introduce it to us. Christianity, Islam, and the African traditional religion were already existent in Africa way before the colonial era. Now, we would move to the contributions of religion in Africa. Religion has had numerous positive impacts on African societies throughout history, and it continues to play a significant role in various aspects of life. So here are some of the key positive contributions of religion in Africa, as you can see over there. And the first one that I would like to talk about is the issue of cultural heritage and preservation. So religion has helped preserve and transmitted cultural traditions and values across generations. So especially with the traditional African religion, most of the practices and stories and rituals that are crucial to our identity as Africans have been preserved within these forms of religion. So our art, our music, some of our practices, some of our way of life and all that, they are embedded in some of these religious practices. So religion didn't necessarily do away with them. They are still things that are there that mark us as Africans. A second contribution of religion is that it helps to build societies and communities. So most religions often foster a sense of unity and belonging among people. And we can all attest to the fact that there are a lot of religious gatherings that we have gone to that, we go and then we come home happy, like weddings, like funerals, like festivals. You go and you meet friends, you have fun and all of that. So religion often fosters a sense of unity and belongingness. There are many of us, sometimes we are down. After you go to church, you come back home, your spirit is lifted up, or you go to the mosque, you hear a sermon and you're encouraged and all of these things. There's that sense of, or maybe there are many of us that we made friends through our various places of worship. And it's because religion provided that opportunity. I mean, our religious belief systems provided that opportunity. So you had the opportunity, you went to church, you met friends, people have met destiny helpers, people have even met husbands and wife in various religious settings. So religion, to a large extent, contributes to social cohesion and community building. It's a central part of community life or life for most people. Okay. Another very important contribution of religion in Africa is that religion or religious organizations have established a lot of schools and educational institutions that have contributed significantly to literacy and education across Africa. So for most of us, most of the schools that we attended, they were built by religious mission groups. So in Ghana, schools like Infantipim, like Wesley Girls, like Presec, like Pope John, St. James, all these schools, they were built by missionaries. And not just schools, but also hospitals. You find Catholic hospitals, Presbyterian hospitals, Pentecostal hospitals, and all that. Religious groups, and not even just on Christianity, even for Islam, groups like the Ahmadiyya. So you find schools that are built by the Ahmadiyya, so T.I. Ahmadiyya, and all these schools, and some hospitals have been or were built by some of these religions or religious groups. So religion, to a large extent, has led to the development of Africa in many ways through infrastructure and all that. And many of us are beneficiaries of these things. Many of us, or let me say all of us, have benefited in one way or the other from a religious establishment, whether it's a school or a church or a community center or a borehole or anything of that sort. So religion has helped in that way. It has helped so much in that way. Another thing or another factor or another contribution of religion is that religion helps, or religion has provided a framework, a moral or ethical framework that helps to guide us or help us with relation to how we must behave. So it provides a moral framework that guides the behavior of individuals and communities. And religion promotes values such as honesty, integrity, compassion, and justice. So when you pick the 10 Commandments in Christianity, you get to know that some of the rules there, some of the laws there, if we were to follow them, the world would be a better place. When you pick some of the teachings of the Quran, you get to know that if we were to follow them, the world would be a better place. In fact, the golden rule, which is a rule that is in almost every religion, as you can see from the slide over there, the golden rule, that is do unto others as you would have them do unto you, is a rule that is echoed in almost every religion, in the Islamic religion, in the Buddhist religion, in the African traditional religion, and all of that. This particular rule, I believe that if we were to follow it, or if our leaders were to follow it, most of the challenges that we are facing in Africa would not happen. Most of it. If you love your neighbor as yourself, you wouldn't be involved in any corrupt practice. You wouldn't be involved in any act that would make your neighbor or your brother or your sister feel less of himself. If you love your brother or your sister as yourself, when your sister is hungry, when your brother is hungry, you help him. So religion actually propagates certain values that if we were to follow them, Africa would have been a better place. So religion helps or provides a moral framework that is supposed to guide us. However, it's unfortunate that for most of us or most people don't really take these things serious, and so we find ourselves doing things anyhow and all of that. And then also, not just only that, religion also helps in or has contributed in the issue of peace building and conflict resolution. So religious leaders and institutions have often played crucial roles in mediating conflicts and promoting peace and reconciliation in Africa. A typical example is in South Africa, the Archbishop Desmond Tutu, whose leadership was able to help South Africa heal as a nation after they went through that period of apartheid. And it's not just only him. I mean, even in the diaspora, the Black African community In the US, people like Martin Luther King, through their religious belief systems, were able to push for certain advocacy or certain things in society. In Ghana here, we have people like Archbishop Gabriel Palmer Bakel, and including the National Chief Imam, who over the years have helped foster peace amongst various groups and people in Ghana. In the early 2000s, there was a National Reconciliation Commission that was set up by the Kufuor administration. When they wanted to investigate some of the events that happened in the 1980s, the coup d'etats and all of that. And if not for the guidance and leadership of some of these religious leaders, like the Archbishop Palmer Bakel, like the National Chief Imam, and other religious figures, it would have brought a whole lot of issues, because there were a lot of unforgiveness. People felt they had been hurt through the coup d'etat. People who had been in prison wanted to pay back and all that. But through the leadership of some of these religious leaders, we were able to navigate through it peacefully as a nation. And so religion helps to foster peace building and conflict resolution in Africa. And then also support during times of crisis. Religious organizations have often provided aid during crisis, such as national disaster, famine, pandemics like the COVID that happened. We had a lot of churches or a lot of mosques or people or even chiefs and all of that giving out food and other things to support people. And they did that in the name of their religion, because their religion promotes things like that. And then also, religion empowers people and helps people to advocate for change in society. So religious groups often advocate for social justice, human rights, and equitable development. So many churches and mosques in Africa advocate for the rights of the marginalized, including women, children, and people with disabilities. Religious leaders even often use their influence to raise awareness on critical issues such as HIV/AIDS, gender equality, environmental conservation, and all of that. When you come to my church where I fellowship, you get to, there are a lot of social intervention. In fact, there's a whole ministry dedicated for social issues that helps with maybe climate change and all of that. And it's common in most churches. There are churches like the Pentecost, who I know a few years ago built a whole prison for the nation to help tackle the issue of congestion in prisons in Ghana. So religious leaders are able to use their platforms to propagate certain changes in society. So religion has contributed significantly in Africa. And the final one I'll talk about is the issue of spiritual comfort. There are many of us that, if not for our places of worship, we would have lost it in certain difficult moments. So for some of us, you go to church down, depressed, or you go to your mosque, or maybe you see a local healer or a local religious leader, and you go to him for counsel, and he's able to give it to you. Religion has provided Africans a place where they can find solace and strength in their faith. It has provided a sense of purpose for most people, and so most people are able to do certain things for the benefit of humanity because they derive these purposes or these reasons from their religious point of view or from their religious perspective. So there are a lot of contributions that religion has had in Africa. However, we would move to the misconceptions that we have when it comes to religion in Africa. So you can move to the next slide. Really good. So when you look at the slide over there, you see a diagram there where it's a mixture of a sheep and a wolf, and then also you see a man giving Dettol to somebody to drink as a form of religious practice and all that. And sometimes, or in most cases, some of these things have led to certain misconceptions that people have had about religion. The first misconception that we would tackle is that religion is the root cause of all conflict. There are many people who believe that religious differences are the primary cause of conflict in Africa. And so most conflicts have deeper political, economic, and social roots. And that is, so the point is that many people believe that religion leads to division. It brings conflicts. So examples are like the Boko Haram that we find in Nigeria and all that. In fact, in history, people try to even link the Rwandan genocide to religious conflicts and all that. But when you do a critical study of that conflict, you get to know that it was driven primarily by ethnic and political factors and had nothing to do with religion at all. Even with the Boko Haram, when you look at their actions critically, you get to know that they are just using religion as a mask to propagate their own agenda. Most of them are tied to politics. Most of them are tied to ethnic issues and not necessarily religion. True religion in its sense do not promote things like that. So it's a general misconception that religion is being used as a root of conflict in Africa. The second is that religion hinders modernization and development. Some believe that religion prevents social and technological progress in Africa. However, it's not true. I don't think there's any other establishment that has contributed the most to the development of societies in Africa than religion. So many religious organizations have actively contributed to modernization efforts through education, healthcare, and developmental projects. So like I mentioned, the schools and hospitals, if not for religious groups, we wouldn't have had most of the establishments we have in Africa. Missionary schools and all that, they have played a crucial role in educational development of many African countries. So religion does not hinder modernization. In fact, societies that apply religion well develop quickly or faster, right? Societies that apply religion, because you open yourself up to modernization, it doesn't hinder modernization in any way. A third misconception is that religion is opposed to science, which is not true. Many religious communities embrace scientific advancements and integrate them with their beliefs. So most religious hospitals that we go to, they combine spiritual care with modern medical practices to treat patients. Most of the religious hospitals we go to, they don't just, when you go to those, or let's when you go to the Catholic hospital, they don't just pray and pray and pray and pray over you and then they tell you are healed and you go home. No, they apply modern science or modern tools to help heal you. So they give you injection, they do a scan on you, they do this on you to know what is wrong with you, and then they do it by also adding their faith to it through prayer and all of that. They don't just do it purely by opposing science and all that. So religion is never opposed to science as some people make it look like. A fourth thing I would say here is that religion, or a fourth misconception, is that religious leaders only focus on spiritual matters. And it's not true, because the reality is that many religious leaders are deeply involved in social, political, and economic issues, and they advocate for justice and development in our societies. Most religious leaders they are people who are involved in social and political issues. I mentioned Archbishop Desmond Tutu. I mentioned Martin Luther King, and all that, and all these people. When you come to Ghana, people like Mensa Otabil and all that, they sometimes make statements that have an impact on our societies and all that, and they are not statements that are purely religious. And the final misconception that I'll discuss here is that religious institutions are wealthy and corrupt. This is a common one. People have the notion that all religious institutions in Africa are wealthy and corrupt. But the reality is that although some institutions and leaders or religious leaders may be wealthy or corrupt, many others are not. And many others are actually committed to serving their communities. So many churches and mosques or African societies, they run charity programs and provide social services with limited resources. There are a lot of churches, there are a lot of mosques that have scholarship funds, that have funds that help the poor and needy. But we don't often talk about it because people's minds are just on the bad ones that are happening in society and all of that. But there are many, many, many charity organizations that are in the name of religion, that are being done in the name of religion. Charity organizations, people paying people's medical bills, school fees, and all that. And I'm sure some of us here may have been beneficiaries of some of these charity programs, right? So the big question is that, in light of the contributions and the misconceptions that we have discussed, is religion a tool for good or evil? Is religion a tool for good or evil? Right? But then this is my response to it, that like a knife, religion can be an advantage or a disadvantage depending on how it is used. And just as a knife can be used to prepare food or cause harm, religion can be a powerful force for positive change or used as a tool for evil. So religion in its essence, religion in its pure state, is never something that is bad. It's never bad at all. It's, in most cases, like we saw from the contributions, that it has helped Africa in so many ways. However, it's just some people who end up using it as a tool for their own negative agenda. It doesn't necessarily make religion bad. And that's why I'm using the knife analogy, because all of us use knives in the kitchen. We use knives to cook. We use knives to cut trees. We use knives to weed. We use knives to do other things, right? But then people also use knives to fight. They use knives to kill others. And it doesn't make a knife in its pure state wrong. So we must look at it from this perspective, that religion actually is not a problem. It's never a problem. It's the way sometimes people use it. That is what makes it a problem. So now, what then is the problem of Africa? After having made the claim that religion is not Africa's problem, now let's take a critical look at this picture. You get to know that the biggest problem we have in Africa is the issue of leadership. And so you see here a wolf telling a pack of sheep or a group of sheep or whatever that when you elect me, I will become a vegetarian. And most people or most of the sheep will end up believing it. When you look at how they are shouting and jubilating. And that's the state that we find ourselves here in Africa. Most of the issues we have here is deeply rooted in poor leadership, political instability, corruption, poverty, lack of education, and not religion. Religion has, to a large extent, nothing to do with the crisis we face here in Africa. It's mostly a leadership issue. Leaders being corrupt, leaders squandering public funds, leaders accumulating wealth for themselves and their families. That is the problem we have in Africa, and not necessarily religion. Religion, to a large extent, has contributed positively for the development of Africa, and that is what I seek to address today. So this is the end of my discussion.
Thank you so much, Aziz, for making it a point to be with us today. I really appreciate you. I know you have a lot of things going on, but thank you for making time with us. And to our audience and listeners, thank you for joining us. We planned the program, but if you guys don't show up, then there is no way we can make this program a success. So I think Enoch has dropped our group link in the in-chat message. So if you want to join us for any update, you can just click on the link and join our WhatsApp group. Once again, my name is Liliefa, and I did this with Chanimbe. Should I mention your name? Come on, unmute yourself and call out your own name.
Oh, Lily did this with Enoch Chanimbe, but I love Chanimbe to Enoch. Yeah, so Chanimbe.
Okay.
That's my name.
So
I'm an African, that's why.
Oh my God. So see you all next 2 weeks.